Amara often wondered if silence could be louder than words. Her home, once filled with laughter and gentle exchanges, had turned into a place where silence ruled like an unwelcome guest. She had been married to Samir for 5 years, and while their beginning had been full of promises and tenderness, the glow had dimmed too quickly. Samir had become a man consumed by ambition, always running after success, promotions, and recognition. He left early in the mornings, came home late at night, and often carried his work into the weekends. At first, Amara supported him wholeheartedly. She encouraged him to climb the ladder, to prove himself in a competitive world. But as time passed, she realized that in his chase for professional triumphs, he was leaving something far more precious behind: the bond they once shared. She tried to keep their connection alive with little gestures: his favorite meals, handwritten notes, waiting for him at the dinner table. But Samir's responses had grown shorter, colder, until eventually, they stopped altogether. One evening, Amara sat at the dining table, staring at the 2 plates she had set. The food had long grown cold. A message blinked on her phone: "Running late. Don't wait up." She closed her eyes and felt the weight of loneliness press into her chest. It wasn't just the absence of her husband. It was the absence of his care, his attention, his love. Needing air, she stood up, slipped into a simple cotton dress, and stepped into the garden barefoot. The grass was cool beneath her feet, and the moonlight wrapped around her like a soft shawl. She felt stripped, not of clothing, but of all the defenses she had built over the years. Out there in the open, she was bare in spirit, unmasked, vulnerable, and achingly human. Across the street, Rahil watched her from his balcony. He was Samir's boss, a man of quiet authority, respected by many but truly known by few. Rahil had only seen Amara a handful of times, usually at company dinners, where she stood beside her husband with a polite smile that never reached her eyes. But tonight, under the moonlight, he saw her differently. There was no pretense, no forced smile. Just a woman baring her soul to the night, unaware of the quiet witness nearby. Something stirred in Rahil's heart. It wasn't a shallow pull. It was deeper, heavier. He recognized the loneliness etched across her face because he too carried it. Despite his success, his grand home, and his polished image, Rahil lived a solitary life. And in Amara's quiet vulnerability, he saw a reflection of himself. The next morning, Rahil walked into the office where Samir greeted him with files and statistics. Samir, ever ambitious, spoke of numbers, targets, and strategies. But Rahil's thoughts drifted. He wondered if Samir ever noticed the silence in his wife's eyes, if he ever realized what he was neglecting. At one point, Rahil asked casually, "How is Amara these days?" Samir barely looked up. "She's fine. Always busy with her little things. You know how women are." He said it with such indifference that it made Rahil's jaw tighten. There was a carelessness in his tone, a dismissal that unsettled Rahil. That evening, fate played its hand. A sudden downpour swept across the neighborhood, flooding the streets. Amara, rushing to bring in the clothes from the line, struggled with the heavy basket. Her foot slipped, and she nearly fell. But before she could steady herself, Rahil appeared, catching her arm. "Careful," he said, his voice calm yet firm. She looked up, startled. "Mr. Rahil?" "Just Rahil," he corrected gently. "Let me help." Together they carried the clothes inside. The storm roared outside, but in that small moment, Amara felt an unfamiliar warmth. She hadn't been helped in so long, hadn't been treated like someone worth caring for. She offered him tea in gratitude, and for the first time, they spoke beyond polite greetings. She talked about books she had read, her love for painting, and the small joys she found in her garden. Rahil listened with full attention, never interrupting, never dismissing. His eyes didn't wander to his phone. His mind didn't drift elsewhere. He was present, and that presence was more comforting than anything she had felt in years. As days passed, their paths continued to cross. Sometimes it was at the local market, sometimes a brief exchange while tending to their gardens. Each conversation was simple, ordinary even, but beneath the surface was a growing connection. One evening, Amara found herself confessing softly, "It feels strange, but it's easier to talk to you than to my own husband." Rahil didn't smile at that. His eyes held hers with quiet intensity. "That's not how it should be. You deserve more than silence. The word struck her deeply. It wasn't just what he said. It was the conviction behind it, the acknowledgement that her loneliness was real and undeserved. Still, Amara knew her boundaries. She never let her thoughts wander too far, never let her heart cross the invisible line. But the more she resisted, the more impossible it became to ignore the comfort Rahil brought into her life. For Rahil, it was no different. He admired her strength, her quiet dignity, the way she carried herself despite being neglected. He never intended to fall into this silent pull, yet emotions have a way of slipping past reason. He told himself he wouldn't cross the line, that respect demanded restraint. But in the privacy of his heart, he carried her image like a flame. Then came the stormy night that changed everything. Samir had left on a business trip, leaving Amara alone. Thunder crashed across the sky, and the power went out, plunging her home into darkness. She lit a single candle, its trembling flame casting shadows across the walls. A knock came at the door. It was Rahil, holding a lantern. "I thought you might need this," he said. "The outage might last a while." She smiled faintly and invited him in. They sat in the living room as rain pounded against the windows. The glow of the lantern softened their faces, making the night feel intimate, as if the storm had built a world of their own. They spoke of memories, her childhood in the countryside, his struggles when he first built his company. They laughed at small things, shared silences that weren't heavy but comforting. Time slipped away unnoticed. At one point, Amara whispered, "Do you ever feel bare? Like the world has stripped you down to your soul, and no one even notices?" Rahil's gaze lingered on her, steady and unflinching. "Yes," he said. "But tonight, I notice." Her heart pounded at those words. Not because they were romantic in the obvious sense, but because they were true. For the first time in years, someone had truly seen her. When the storm calmed, Rahil stood. "I should go." She nodded, though part of her wanted to stop him. "Good night, Rahil." "Good night, Amara." After he left, she sat in the glow of the lantern, her heart a battlefield of loyalty and longing. She knew what society would say if they ever knew. She knew the weight of vows and promises. And yet, she also knew that in Rahil's presence, she had felt alive again. From that night onward, nothing was the same. They remained respectful, never crossing the boundary of propriety, but their hearts carried unspoken truths. Amara began to bloom again, painting, laughing, humming while she worked in the garden. She carried herself with a quiet lightness that hadn't been there before.